Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War on Steam Deck. So I remember these games a while back. I don't know why I started playing them again, and I was like, I never made a video of these on Steam Deck. They are huge games, especially the first one. I would say is one of my favorites. So now that Monolith, the people that are behind these two games, is down, they basically laid off everyone. They closed the studio, so rest pepperoni's Monolith. This game is verified, so everything should work correctly. The original, it came out in 2014, and I made a video back then when it came out. Kinda crazy to think about, 11 years ago. And Shadow of War is when they effed everything up. At least WB Games is also verified and does everything like it needs. And it came out in 2017, but it had a lot of microtransactions. The game got patched quite significantly to fix that issues. And they're usually pretty cheap, like with our sponsor Instant Gaming. On Instant Gaming you can find this game, Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, for $2 to $3 each with all the expansions. So if you're interested, follow the affiliate link in the description so you get the games for super cheap and you're helping the channel at the same time. You can also find newer games like The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered for PC, PlayStation, Xbox and Nintendo Switch with 24/7 support. For basically $7 you get both games and lots of hours of content, and due to this partnership we're giving away a free game to one of you guys each month. If you don't participate, follow myself and Instant Gaming on social media for more chances. And if you win, you'll get a game of your choice. So thanks again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Let's continue. By default, by the way, the game starts at 560p, which I do not recommend. Change it to 800p. Then when it comes to play the settings, to the advanced options, everything was on the absolute lowest, which again, a waste in my opinion, because the game can do so much more when it comes to visuals. Basically a mix of medium and ultra. I'll show you why in a second. Tessellation, you can actually turn it off, but in this case I kept it on. Apply the settings, make sure to restart the game. Some stuff needs a game restart to apply. Alright, so welcome to Shadow of Mordor, let's jump out. And if you never heard about this game, it's basically Batman Arkham Combat mixed with Assassin's Creed parkour. I really do enjoy this game. Since it came out, I still play it to this day. And as always, I show you unlocked frame rates. But why don't I go higher if I can get like 70 FPS? Well, that's a great question. First of all, what you have to keep in mind is that this game actually has two quote-unquote open worlds, two smaller maps than games nowadays, two maps, and this one is not the most demanding one. So if we jump out of this, as you can see, it's just some terrain into the distance with buildings, like not a great deal. Well, actually, once you play enough of the game, you can go to another location. And once we get here to this other map, this map has significantly more foliage. That's why I lowered that setting. But the frame rate will be hovering more into the 60s instead of the 70s. Because to this engine, well, in general, foliage is pretty heavy on the GPU. But in this game in particular, I think it's more of a hit. So yeah, as you can see here, even in combat, we're still getting some drops here and there, but I think this is good enough to at least stay into the 60s range. Let's make them attack me. But again, I think this game is completely badass and you should play it, especially again if you enjoyed the Batman Arkham games, if you like Assassin's Creed parkour. It's all a mix of that, with something called the Nemesis system. So the enemies that you kill, the captains, then, I mean, if they kill you, they level up and then they fight each other and get more powerful. I mean, that's a system that they patented, unfortunately, so now it's locked until like 2035. And in handheld, my advice for you, even if you have an OLED Steam Deck, is to actually just lock it to 60 frames. You should have pretty long battery life doing that. But at the beginning of the game, you'll be in the other map. The other map is less demanding, so with the 60 FPS cap, you should be good to go. Now it's rainy, that's perfect, plus grass heavy location, that means lowest performance that you can get. Again, if you want to smooth this out, put the resolution at 90%. The game will look a bit softer, but again, it's just something that could happen. Just keep that in mind. I don't think it's a big deal. I'll just keep it like this. Looks super sharp. Only has FXAA. So if you don't mind FXAA, it's not a soft looking game like the TAA we have nowadays. It's more of a classic rendering solution when it comes to anti-aliasing, at least. And there goes the guy with the info. Oops. But as you can see, looking at this, it's basically Arkham combat with Assassin's Creed's parkour, which again, it's a fantastic mix, at least in my opinion. And there it goes. But the game still looks fantastic to this day, at least in my opinion. And considering it's a game from 2014, the performance makes complete sense, of course. And now they're kicking my ass, but that's okay, it's part of the game. Okay, they got me. Let's see if I can get away from this. By the way, if one of them kills you, he basically will level up and be more powerful and continue climbing up the ranks, so it's harder to actually beat them. Okay, now he's with me, and let's do something super cool. Teleport. But I'm a huge fan of this game, and it's super cheap, so no reason not to get it, in my opinion. When it comes to Shadow of War, we're in a similar situation to Shadow of Mordor, that we had a very low resolution, like I think 640p or something like that. And there was everything at the lowest settings. I think we can push it much more. So 800p with basically a mix of medium and high. I just avoided tessellation and I preload the high MIPS, so we have enough memory to do all that. And this doesn't allow me to enable it, so ignore it for now. And now we are in Shadow of War. Welcome to the game. So this one has a much bigger variation when it comes to maps and what's the content. There's a lot also more enemies on screen. So yeah, this one, it's actually much more demanding when it comes to the environment and amount of characters on screen. There's also invasions on forts, which is super cool, at least in my opinion. But this was riddled with microtransactions. So yeah, unfortunately you had to do a lot of grinding. That's what stopped me from actually completing this game. But visually it's superior to Shadow of Mordor due to the sheer scale in comparison. And I'm on purpose running into this because, like I mentioned in the previous game, the foliage heavy parts is when it drops the most, like in the previous game. So if you want native resolution like I'm doing right now, my advice is just a lock to 45 on the OLED and 40s on the Steam Deck LCD. That should keep you the 99% of the time into the 40 to 45 FPS range. But there's also a way to get 60s, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Biggest update over the original, we have forts to attack. So you do this across the entire game in the open locations. There is one fort to take, and then you can replay this against your friends' forts. You can customize your army and do all that. And as you can see here, with all that's happening, the CPU is starting to cry a little on a few cores. Let's attack up there. I have my teleport powers. But here we're still basically GPU limited when targeting 45 FPS. So if you're targeting 60s, the CPU will cry more. But as you can see, we're still completely fine. On a very high frame rate, we're still above 40. And there's a much bigger amount of enemies than we're used to, said in some way. Okay, so now against one of the more powerful forts that I've seen, at least when it comes to my friends list. So more characters. And as you can see there, all my minions down there. And all those defenses. Very far away. Not a problem. Have them skills. And here again is where the CPU cries, especially. The GPU as well, but the CPU. Oof. Yeah, this one is very, very high level place. So yeah, of course I'm going to get my ass kicked. But what I'm trying to show you is that the performance seems to be fine when locked to 45. I think it's time to show you what 60s can look like, because some of you guys probably want that. Alright, so how do we get 60s? Pretty simple. At 800p, go into dynamic resolution and select 60. After you do that, hit X to apply the settings. Then go into the options and keep everything on medium with textures on high. And that was good enough for me. That gave me 60s using dynamic resolution, funnily enough. So the dynamic resolution thing in this game works fantastically well, way better than I expected. So now if we go into the foliage heavy location, the game doesn't care. Of course, you're going to have softer visuals, because obviously we're playing at a lower resolution, but you keep those medium settings, and the frame rate is pretty solid. At least in a GPU heavy scenario such as this woods area. There's also a benchmark tool that is pretty interesting, that I think it does a good job on measuring what the game actually runs like. And as soon as you get into places with a good amount of foliage, yeah, the frame rate goes down. In this case, the resolution will go down. Alright, let's make that CPU cry now. We are with dynamic resolution targeting 60s on a fortress battle. And let's see if we can hold 60s. I don't think so. Well, it drops below 60. As you can see, the GPU is not maxed out. So I'm not surprised. The game is trying to compensate with resolution dropping, but it's not enough. Yeah, the CPU is just crying in the corner. So I think the 45 FPS cap makes more sense. Although these fortress battles are more of a rarity when it comes to the campaign. They are like once per map, and there's like 4 or 5 maps as far as I remember. So yeah, they are a big part of the game, but not the biggest part of the game. And I'd say what they drop the most, at least for me, have been moments where you're starting to attack the castle. So that's definitely just a CPU limitation, and the bigger the castle, obviously, the bigger is going to be a hit on the CPU. But I think with a 60 FPS dynamic resolution, it looks good enough, and it's smooth 99% of the time. The thing is, again, when you're in a fortress battle such as this one, that's going to come into be more commonplace closer to the end of the game. So the first battles shouldn't be CPU limited, shouldn't be a problem. But again, this is basically the previous game with a much bigger map, many more activities, and they also added microtransactions, which absolutely sucks. That's what killed the game, at least in my opinion. So it doesn't mean that the game is bad. I think this game is fantastic, but they fixed all the microtransaction thing. Now it's not a pain in the ass to actually get orcs for the final battles. But yeah, basically the company that made this game is now no longer existing, which is a shame. They also made the Fear games, which I also enjoy, at least 1 and 2. So yeah, Arkham Combat with Lord of the Rings in the background and some Assassin's Creed sprinkled on top of it. So would I recommend Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War on Steam Deck? Hell yeah, they are insanely verified in my book. They can both run at 60 FPS, with Shadow of War making some resolution sacrifices. some small moments where it can drop into the 50s, but they worked right out of the box. By default, my only critique is that by default, they are basically at half the resolution of the Steam Deck and at the lowest settings, which, as you can see in this video, you can go much higher and have better visuals. So I think there's no reason to put it at low settings by default with low resolution. Maybe that's something that's out of Valve's control, but I highly recommend these two games on Steam Deck, and again, you can get them super cheap on Instant Gaming, or they're also discounted heavily on Steam very often. So I think there's no reason not to play these games. They're fantastic and they work well. I mean, they're games from like 7 years ago at this point. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did revisiting Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. You can now play them on the go, which blows my mind because I played this at 30 on my low range PC back then. So it feels weird to be able to play this so smoothly on a portable device. And the battery life, I mean, you get like 3 hours on the OLED. There we go. Reduced to atoms. There he goes. Well, hopefully we can use the Nemesis system on future games after the patent ends in 2035. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see ya next time. Bye guys.